First one was about Amy. Now, I met her on a dating app, and we met up and we started dating, and we were trying it out. And I noticed pretty early on that she seemed like really serious about this relationship, like really quickly, which is fine. It's whatever. But then her family, she was living with her mom and stepdad at the time. They informed me that they had a vacation plan. This was a Vegas vacation. Apparently, it was an annual habit. They went to Las Vegas and stayed there for a week every single year. Now, of course, my first thought is, you have annual family vacation to Vegas money? I did not grow up with annual family vacation to Vegas money. I grew up with, we took 2 vacations my entire childhood, and both of them involved staying with out of state uncles money. Also, I'm just not that interested in going to Vegas. Like, I don't really like gambling. I can eat anywhere. I don't like heat at all. Also, we've only been dating for like 3 weeks, and you're asking if I want to stay in a hotel room with her that you're paying for in Vegas for a week? Seems like everybody thinks this is moving really fast. They convinced me. Basically, they were like, we'll just buy you the tickets. Oh, fine, whatever. A few weeks later, and probably about 2 months into this relationship, somewhere in about 2 or 3 months, we've been hanging out a lot. And I go and I do other stuff, I go to work and I see her. But I see her a lot, like pretty constantly. And one day, when I'm out with my friends, doing stuff, putzing around, she's at work, I'm out just hanging out. I come home. I'm talking to her later that day after she gets out of work. And she's asking, like, do you want to do something tonight and everything? I was like, I don't, maybe, sure. And she asked how my day was, and I explained it, and I tell her about, like, oh yeah, I was out with my friends or whatever. And she gets mad at me. So I go to her house, and we sort of talk about this. I'm like, what is going on? What is happening? And it turns out what she's mad about is that I was out socializing without her. Like, that I had a social life that I was actively engaging in while she was at work and not with me for that. And so I'm just like, hey, that's a weird thing to get mad about. Like, you understand that, right? Like, this isn't the first time I've been hanging out with my friends without you. Like, I've been doing this fairly frequently. It just, most of the time, nothing interesting enough to mention had happened. And she's like, feeling betrayed. I'm just like, don't you have a social life? Don't you have friends that you talk to, like, outside of when I'm not around? And she's like, no, I don't. And I was just like, how? What is going on with you? How do you think this is healthy? And we talked about it a bit, and it turns out that this is how her mom and stepdad were when they met. They met, and they spent every waking moment together, and then they got married, and they have spent every waking moment together ever since. And so she grew up thinking that that was normal, because apparently they got married when she was very young. And so I was just like, no, that's not normal. Like, so we had this conversation for a little while, and ultimately I was just like, look, it's become very apparent that we want very different things out of this relationship, and it's irreconcilable. Like, what you want is something I am absolutely not going to be on board with. What I want is something you are clearly not going to be okay with. The only way that we could possibly make this healthy is if, like, I asked you to change who you are fundamentally as a person and what you want out of a relationship, and that's inappropriate. I can't ask you to do that. And she goes, well, what about you? I said, what about me? She goes, why don't you change? And I laughed at her, and I said, listen, we're trying to have a serious conversation here. So we broke up. But the thing is, the Vegas trip hadn't happened yet. And we had those tickets. And I, having a certain amount of sense at least, was just like, well, I'm not going to that. I don't know if you've ever, like, pissed off rich folk, but they get weird, like, really quick. And they were accusing me of, like, scamming them or something because I wasn't going to use the plane tickets that they paid for, and I wasn't going to use the hotel room that they paid for. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. Find someone else or suck it up. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to Vegas. And so I start getting these emails from her mom that are just like, accusing me of being a terrible person, and my email address involved a word that looked like Nightcrawler. It had some elite stuff in it, but it looked like Nightcrawler. And she's like, "That's a good name for you because you're such a snake." And I was just like, "Do you think night crawlers are snakes? Like, when you're driving down the street and you go past one of those, like, little gas stations that clearly used to be a house and might still be a house for the owners upstairs, and they have the sign on the side that says night crawlers, you think they're selling people snakes?" So I kind of ignored that, but then I noticed Amy driving past my house, like, a lot. Now the thing is, I lived on the street that didn't go anywhere. Like, it literally did not go. It went to a T intersection, and if you turned left off that on that T intersection, you went right back where you started. And if you went right, you went to a cemetery, and that was it. That was the only place that road led. It was not easy to spot if you were driving by and didn't know it wasn't there. And so, like, you don't accidentally turn out. Like, no one gets lost. No one just wanders onto this road and turns onto it. The last time someone was lost well enough that they got lost on that road, his name was Odysseus. And she lived an hour away. And so I'm sitting on my porch smoking cigarettes, and I see her cruising by, realize that I see her, and then speed off to the T intersection, which is 50 feet away, and then turn and leave. And I'm just like, oh, we're doing this now? And that continued for months. They were demanding that I pay for the ticket, which I wouldn't do. They were demanding that I pay for the hotel room, which I wasn't going to do. She kept trying to contact me. At one point, she offered to, like, drop the whole thing if I met up with her for dinner, like, one last time. And I was like, no, I'm just not gonna pay you. Like, that's not gonna happen. I think I did ultimately end up paying them like $50 just to shut them up, but I did block all contact, and eventually she stopped, stalking me. So that was nice.